So today's class, as the banner suggests, is about thinking errors that our brain makes. I keep talking as if it's our brain who makes the errors, and we are all very genius, and we're all very smart, but it's the brain that's stupid. But funnily, the brain is us. But anyways, yeah. In any case, we're going to be talking about thinking errors. How many of you have heard of this term called critical thinking? Almost all of you like, no, sir, I know you're baiting me. I know you want me to give the wrong answer. Yeah, but are you serious? I used to think, okay, I don't know. So, again, you guys are being, I don't know if you're being honest or not. When I was your age, I thought critical thinking meant smart. Hey, critical thinking means anyone who's a scientist, anyone who's like a mathematician, they are the critical thinkers. But 70% of you seem to believe otherwise. I'm surprised because I used to believe that. Then. How many of you believe that? How about this? How many of you believe that all smart people are very critical thinkers? The statement I'm making is all smart people, okay? All intelligent, let's say intelligent people. We know, right, if someone is intelligent. All intelligent people are critical thinkers. Yes or no? Hmm. It's like, oh, it's almost exactly 50-50. Interesting. Half of you are like, yes, sir, obviously, like how intelligent people are critical thinkers, right? Half of you are like, I don't know, this sounds doubtful. Sir always asks these questions and then he says that's the wrong answer. So I'm just gonna be safe and just give the opposite answer that I think is correct. And some of you are probably like, no, critical thinking and intelligence are different, right? So some of you might also be wondering, hey, what exactly is intelligence? Like, how do you know if someone is intelligent or not? You can say you might have heard of these IQ tests, right? I guess like typical traditional intelligence is people who score high on IQ tests. That's what traditional intelligence is. So anyone who scores high on IQ tests is basically an intelligent person. And yeah, the question was, do you think they're also critical thinkers? And like we saw, there's some 50-50. Some of you agree, some of you disagree, or some of you are doubtful, right? Cool. So let's figure this out today. Let's understand what is this whole critical thinking thing. Everyone keeps talking about it. Like, what is this? All this other term that keeps thrown about is rationality. How many of you is how many of you think that rational people and critical thinkers, like basically critical thinking and rationality is the same? 60%. 60% says no, no, not at all. 40% says yes. I actually, honestly, I'll be very honest, I don't know the answer. I don't know what's exactly different. I keep using it interchangeably. Right now, at least, I think like I genuinely like. I would say that a rational person is also a critical thinker. That's what I would say, but I don't know. I honestly don't know if that's right or wrong. Even I need to do my research. But yeah, I'm surprised that many of you don't believe so. It's also possibly because you think I want you to give the wrong answer. Anyways, let's see. Cool, cool. So anyway, this session is all about all this. Okay, critical thinking, rationality. What is thinking? What is not? What is good thinking? And all this sort. Now, the let's start with some. How do we go about this session? So basically, the kind of I'll go to the polls. Before I go to the polls, I want you to keep this framing in your head. I want to keep this kind of framework in your head. In effect, your brain is kind of divided into two parts. Okay, you can call it. Yeah, the whole the boring names that's given to it is system 1 and system 2. That's the boring name, but I want to give it, we'll give some other names. But basically two parts. One part is like, it's like, you can say it's like the more intuitive and more quick part. It's the one that quickly gives you decisions. The other part of your brain is more like the analytical part, the one that takes time to process things and so on. For example, how shall I say it? If I say, hey, what is 3 into 2? Okay, most of you will say it's 6 quickly. It's a quick answer, right? 3 into 2 will say it's 6. So the part of your brain that gave you that answer is the quick part of the brain, the fast part of the brain. All right. But what if I say, hey, okay, fine, 3 into 2 is fine, but what is the answer to 1724 into 2766? Or 1724 plus 2766? Now suddenly you're like, hey, wait, I need to think, I need to write, I need to. The part of your brain you use when you're writing stuff like down or thinking about this, that's the more analytical, slow part of your brain. So there's a fast part. Actually, fast and slow is better. There's a fast part and there is slow part. Okay, so most of our thinking is kind of divided into two parts like this. Okay, of course, it's not like, though I say there are two parts of your brain, it's not like this. One half is like this, the other half is like, it's not like left side of your brain is like this, right side of, it's not like that. there are different parts of the brain that contribute. Just assume that your brain is effectively made of two parts: a quick part and a slow part, or a fast part and a slow part. Yeah, that's better. That's still better than system one and system two. That's so boring. But anyway, so yeah, that's like how generally how we think. If you think about it, you'll see either you think fast or you think slow. And the reason I'm talking about this is the biases, or rather, many of the errors that we make when thinking primarily tends to come from the quick part, the fast part, like most of you might predict. The fast part of our brain tends to make us generally make bad decisions and think badly, right? So let me also focus a little more on this. What is what is bad thinking? Like, what do you mean by thinking errors? What do you mean by biases? You might have heard of biases. Have you heard of this term, biases? Okay, cool. Many of you have heard of this term because I think some of you are also part of our StayQrious Holistic, where we talk a lot about biases. You've heard of it, but how many of you know what a bias is? Do you know what a bias is? Okay, cool. Tell me in chat then. Most like about 55% say you know what a bias is. Tell me in chat. Tell me in chat what do you think a bias is? Some of you writing just confirmation bias. I know, that's just the name of a bias. What is a bias? Define a bias in chat. Conflict of interest, favoritism, biasness, a mistake. I'm getting a lot of answers here. Partiality. Oh, nice, decent answers. I like the answers too. So a bias, like one of you mentioned there, I would say a bias is more like a mistake. Yeah, I guess the simplest way to put it is it's like a mistake. It's like a thinking error. Error is probably the other synonym I would use. A thinking error can be, or a thinking mistake. A thinking mistake is what you'd call a bias, right? Confirmation bias, I guess, is one of them. Critical thinking is basically correct thinking, or thinking without mistakes, thinking without making mistakes, and thinking without biases. Okay, that's what is, you can say, technically is critical thinking. And like I said, the reason we need to learn critical thinking is because our brains are kind of prone to make a lot of mistakes. We tend to make a lot of mistakes, the especially our intuitions, right? What people call intuitions many times are intuitively wrong. So especially when it comes to decision making, intuitions lead to errors. Critical thinking is basically thinking without errors, and our brain is prone to making a lot of these errors, right? Primarily, I would say our system one, the fast brain. I said no, there's a fast brain and slow brain. The fast part of the brain generally makes these errors, and therefore we end up, let's say, end up making bad decisions, right? So when do we think? When we want to make a decision is when we think, right? So when we think badly, we end up making bad decisions or wrong decisions, and that just leads to bad things. And this is why correct thinking is better. It avoids bad decisions. Okay, so let's jump into some of these bad decisions we sometimes tend to make, right? I don't know. By the way, some of these are like it's not always necessary that all these examples I'm going to give are bad decisions. Okay, so I'm going to give you some many examples. So let's start with a poll. Let's, as you can see, about the most popular option seems to be option C, the third option. I think Rahul might feel confused and need more information to decide. Oh, okay, cool. The second most popular option, I think that Rahul picked the fresh juice because it emphasizes the fruit content. And the last one is the next one is the last option. I think Rahul will disregard all of this. Okay, I'm just curious. I wanted to check what you would choose. There's no right or wrong answer here. Okay, I'm just like, actually, I'm just playing with you because there's no right or wrong answer. I want to see what you mostly choose. Cool. So funnily, what you end up noticing is when you give, especially in supermarkets, when people are given this option, people end up choosing the one that says 90% fruit, instead of the one that says 10%, basically whatever they say, 10% water, right? So do both of you realize, like, do we realize that it's exactly the same? 90% fruit and 10% water is exactly the same. Let's assume fruit juice is just fruit and water. If on one label it says 90% fruit, on the other label it says 10% water, for it's actually the same because together it's 100%, right? But funnily, what ends up being more convincing for some weird reason is the fact is the 90% fruit one. So a label that says 90% fruit is much more, I don't know, convincing. Like people end up choosing that versus something that says 10% water. Why is that? Tell me in chat. Yeah, it's because when you see for some reason, if you see 90% fruit, you're like, oh my God, this is 90% fruit. There's so much fruit. Uh, but suddenly, but if you see 10% water, it's like, oh my God, there's so much water. There's hardly any fruit, even though it's the same. The sum doesn't make really a difference, right? This kind of a bias is actually what it's called. I think, let me confirm the name. I think it's called, this one is called framing effect. This particular common mistake that our brain makes, specifically you can say our fast brain makes, is called framing effect. So why is it called framing effect? Primarily because your fast brain, right, your fast brain kind of frames it in your head quickly, very quickly. It's like, hey, 90% fruit, that means it must be amazing. It quickly frames it as it's a good thing. Or if you see 10% water, it's like, oh my God, 10% water, there's so much water. It quickly makes a decision and a conclusion in your brain, or so your fast brain, and it doesn't let your slow brain take over. It prevents your slow brain from thinking, hey, wait, is that right? Like, hey, if you say 10% water, it must mean 90% fruit, right? And that means 90% is a lot of fruit, right? Or why would you choose one over the other? Because both are equal. Your slow brain can take some time and say, hey, no, maybe it's the same thing. But that then generally doesn't happen because of what is very common here. It's called the framing effect. So because of this, it's very likely that, say, if someone, it's very likely if just because one person, I don't know, let's say there's one bottle that says 90% fruit, and then there's another bottle that says 5% water, right? Obviously, the 90% fruit one, I'm sorry, the 5% water one is better because it has more fruit. But people will actually choose the 90% fruit, the one that says 90% fruit. Does it make sense? So if you have two options, one option which says 90% fruit, and the other option that says 5% water, right? It's very likely that many people will choose the first one, even though it actually, in effect, has lesser fruit. It's probably it's probably worse, right? So this is what, keep your questions. I'm going to come to your questions. I know you have many questions. This is a very this thing, but this is what is called the uh, it's called the framing effect. And many times this leads to bad decisions. So one of the ways in which it leads to bad decisions and bad decision making. Okay. And also I'm going to give you a larger theme to think, like it's like a larger kind of how should I say, a larger concept that kind of ties all this together. It's called what you see is all there is. It's called Vaisati. Vaisati. Okay, I'm going to, I know it's weird. So think about the statement. It's a complicated statement. Basically, your brain, especially your fast brain, thinks that whatever you see, that's all the information that you have. Whatever you think and whatever you feel, that's all the information you have. You don't have to think outside of that, right? It's a very common kind of misconception that leads to a lot of thinking errors. It leads to bad decision making. And this kind of anchoring effect is, for example, it's one example, right? So how does this work? So the moment your brain thinks, oh my God, 90%, it must mean a lot, it's a lot, and that's it, it just sticks to that. It doesn't think outside of it. It stops. Okay. Because it's the fast brain, right? Now let's ask another interesting question when it comes to decision making. Let's see how good you guys are when it comes to decision making. Yeah, so this particular bias is very easy to be, it's very easy to say, you're having this bias. I'm not, can someone tell me what's the name of this bias? Anyone? In chat, tell me in chat, what do you think is the name of this bias? You might have heard of this, especially if you've done clue, if you've done holistic at StayQrious, it's very common. Yes, it's confirmation bias. So what is confirmation bias? Confirmation bias is basically a bias where you have an existing belief and you kind of fit everything into that belief. Like you saw in this case, like Aarti, right? Aarti was basic. Of course, Aarti is a random name. I didn't like choose one of you. I just randomly choose Aarti. Aarti was like, hey, no, if I'm doing bad grades, it's because I'm not work. Only hard work equals good grades. If bad grades means no hard work, right? And she believes that very truly. Um, and therefore just assumes that if the grades goes down, it's primarily because of lack of hard work. So she keeps on putting in more and more effort, right? Whereas, like many of you say, it's not necessary that's the only reason. It could be other things. It could be, hey, bad study techniques, or it could be maybe the difficulty of the subject. Maybe she's not getting enough feedback. Just doing the same thing again and again and putting in work might not solve the problem, right? There might be other things that are root causes for it as well. Maybe there's a lack of understanding. Maybe you have to learn particular topics and so on. So, but this is a very very common bias. It's extremely common. It happens to me all the time. So it's like you have a particular belief, like when it what do I do? Say, let's say I'm creating a curriculum, or I'm creating a content, like I create videos, right? If I'm creating videos, for some reason I believe that this is the best way to teach, and I try to figure out ways to kind of fit it instead of actually checking and seeing if that's the best way to teach, right? In science, it's very common when it comes to scientific thinking. One of the most common errors that scientists make is confirmation bias. So they come up with a theory, they believe in that theory, and they look for evidence that fits that theory, right? And this is why in holistic you would have learned, or it's important to disprove it. It's important to first check if your theory is wrong, right? Try to disprove, make sure you're trying to falsify your theory, right? But anyways, confirmation bias is a very common thing. This is also another examples of Vaisati, like I mentioned, Vaisati. For all those who are joining new, I'm not gonna. It's a code word, okay? I'm not gonna tell you what it means. Only the folks who joined early, you'll understand what Vaisati means. It's a weird name. So why is it Vaisati? Because again, confirmation bias is like, hey, you believe in something, so and you therefore you're looking only at that. So what you see is all there is, right? You believe she Arti, for example, believes that, hey, only hard work equals good grades. So she's only looking at that. She doesn't believe that there could be other ways outside of this belief, right? So Vaisati is confirmation bias is another common side effect or issue that comes from Vaisati. All right, let's go to the third one. This is another interesting one. It's a very common one. Let's talk about Ravi now. Is there any Ravi in the house? Okay. What's the most common answer? It looks like nice. First one, I'd probably avoid the Pani Puri stall too. Okay. That's like the most common answer. Number three is the second most common answer. I know that not all street food is dangerous and would still try it. Okay. Interesting, but I see some more honesty this time. So I think a good amount of you chose the first option. I'll ask a similar question in the same theme. Let's say some of you saw a movie where a plane crashes. Have you watched a plane crash movie? Where a plane it's flying and then it crashes. After watching that movie, will you be more scared of getting onto a plane immediately after watching that movie? And be honest this time. Will you feel a little more, almost all, like 50-50? Half of you are like, yes, sir, I'll be scared. Half of you are lying. Half of you are like, no, I won't be scared. No way, that's true. Okay, you're lying to me. I know it's... Anyway, this is called availability bias. Availability bias. Okay. Why is this a bias? Well, you're making your decisions based on one piece of anecdotal evidence. Just one piece of evidence. Like you saw something on the TV show about Pani Puri, or you saw some movie about a plane crash, and you suddenly think they're more dangerous. But that's not true, right? So how dangerous planes are irrespective of whether you saw the movie or not, right? Or how unhealthy pani puri is it doesn't matter. So that pani puri eat, how healthy or unhealthy it is, doesn't depend on whether you saw a pani puri TV show or not, right? Do you see the difference? Similarly, whether getting, or if you, so it's a thinking error. We think that just because we saw it, suddenly pani puris are more dangerous, or suddenly, I don't know, planes are more dangerous. But that's not true, because that plane was equally risky before you saw it and after you saw it. By the way, planes are not that risky and all. Okay, there's hardly any plane crashes, but there is some very very small minute probability of it happening. That's like saying there's a small minute probability of an earthquake happening right now, right, wherever you are. That probability exists, it's possible, but that probability doesn't increase just because you saw something. An earthquake is also a nice example. Just because you saw a movie about earthquakes suddenly doesn't mean that the probability of earthquakes happening is higher. It doesn't change, because the earthquake doesn't know whether you saw the movie or not. How is the universe going to change based on what you saw? Right. So this is what is called availability bias. It's again coming from Vaisati. Remember your fast brain. There's fast brain and slow brain. the fast brain is very very what's very prone to vaisati. So because it always thinks whatever you see is all there is. So it thinks that when you the moment you see that plane crash movie, is like, oh, all planes should crash, don't get into a plane. Or the moment you see a bad panipuri, whatever, it's like, oh, all panipuris are bad, all bad panipuris are going to be bad stomach, right? Because of vaisati. So this is why it gives another bias called the availability bias. So next time, so how do you I'll come to, I know it's fun to talk about all this. I'll come to how you change your thinking in a bit. I'll come to how do what okay sir, what do you do to get better at it? I'll come to it. But this is the second wait, was it the second or third? I think it's the third bias that I spoke about, which is the availability bias. Okay, let's go to the next one, because I also want to talk about what not to do. Yeah, you can see there's a nice split between the last three answers, but almost all of you are like, no, first one is obviously not true. Yeah, and you're right. The first one is probably the wrong answer. Um, yeah, so I think the core bias here is what is called. This is called an anchoring bias. It's called anchoring bias. Why? You get anchored to the 50% discount, and you're not really looking at the value, the final amount that you're paying, right? So let's say there's one toy with 50% discount, but after 50%, let's say it's actually what they say 2,000 rupees, 50% discount, so finally comes to 1,000 rupees, and another toy that's, I don't know, 800 rupees. You might still, there are people who will choose to buy the one that has 50% discount simply because it has the 50% discount, even though the cost is higher, right? And what they do not do is see if it's actually worth that 1,000 rupees. So after discount, if it's coming to 1,000 rupees, is it actually worth the 1,000 rupees? Is the common misconception, right? So again, this is a bias from our fast brain. Our fast brain is like, oh, hey, 50% discount. How, man? This one is 50% discount. This one no discount. Let's take the one with discount. Your brain will immediately tell you to, take. Obviously, because there's discount, you're getting more value out of it. But that's not always true, right? Because your fast brain is fast, right? And this is again another example of Vaisati, because your first brain is like, hey, 50% discount, that's all that matters. It doesn't, nothing else matters. Right? So it's like what you see is all there is. It doesn't want you to think about other things. And therefore, people end up making the wrong choice of choosing something that's only based on the discount and not based on the actual value. Right? So this is the other common thinking. I think what is the fourth common thinking? What we speak about? First one we spoke about was framing effect. Framing effect was the first one. Second was confirmation bias. Third was availability bias, and this one is anchoring effect. Okay, and then I'm gonna, in the general theme of my master classes, I'm gonna stick to only five. So I don't like going beyond five, because if it goes beyond five, you're most likely gonna forget it. It'll be like too much, because even my brain can't keep more than five things in one time. So I'm gonna talk about one more called. This is very common. Oh, I can see that this today's class is much more honest. The honesty level of this class is much higher than normal. I'm going to show the poll. The most common answer is option B. Yes, sir, it happens, but only a few times. I can see you're like, sir, this is called like humble brag. Sir, I don't make the mistake all the time, but sometimes I make the mistake. Hey, don't lie, okay? I used to make it all the time. Like, if there's a quiz, do you really, really wait to think and give an answer, or do you give the first answer that comes to your head? Especially if it's like a quiz competition. Going to be all the time. Don't you always, like, even today, when I was asking you what a bias is, all of you gave me the first thing that came to mind. Everyone said, was that confirmation bias? Confirmation. But that's not the answer to the question, right? So, but you wanted to share what's the first thing that came to your mind. Why do we do that? Because we are overconfident. We believe that our first answer is correct. We tend to believe that the first thing that comes to our head is correct. And this again is that pesky fast brain of yours. That fast brain always is like, hey, this is correct. Give it out quickly, fast. Don't think too much. It hates it hates making your slow brain think. It wants to give out answers quickly, right? And this is called the overconfidence bias. Especially happens in students, and when we, into me also, when we answer questions and all this stuff, we prefer being fast over being correct. um, we prefer being fast and first versus being slightly slower but more correct and more accurate, right? And this bias or error leads to bad decisions. It leads to bad answers and bad decisions. It's called the overconfidence bias. And again, this is also because of Vaisati, because your fast brain is like, this is all you need. It's like, hey, you got an answer, that's the correct answer, give it off. You don't need to think outside of this. What you see is all there is. Like what you know is all there is your fast brain tells you what you know is all there is, Vaisati, and therefore it's like, hey, enough, don't think too much, just give the answer. Right? And therefore you end up making bad decisions because you don't choose to pause and think. Right? It is also called the overconfidence bias. Okay, so here I'm going to pause. Okay, we spoke about 5 common errors that our fast brain makes, generally our fast brain makes, and which stems from Vaisati. What you think is all there is, or what you see is all there is. What are the 5? The first one was framing effect. Framing effect. The question I had was, we'll come to it. I think I'm going to reiterate all of these questions. First one is framing effect. Second one was what? Confirmation bias, I think. Second was confirmation. Third was availability bias. Fourth was anchoring effect. And the fifth one was overconfidence bias. These were the 5 biases and 5 errors that we spoke about. But before we go to questions, many of you are probably asking, sir, okay, fine, all this is good. Now, what do we do? How do we avoid these biases? And how do we think better? Like, what do we do to get better at this? Okay. Let me ask one more poll. So, yeah, the answer that I would have chosen is the last one. No, because he's letting one instance define all of street food. So, the antidote to this is the availability bias. The antidote to the availability bias, which is, hey, if you see one TV show about bad pani puri, you believe all pani puri is bad. No, you should not do that. You should not let one instance that of something happening decide your belief about, hey, pani puri, because how safe pani puri is, especially street food, is not dependent on that one incident. It's dependent on generally the hygiene, around, like say, it depends on culture, it depends on people, it depends on place, and so on. It depends on multiple things. Basically, that one incident doesn't change, should not affect your decision making. So this is the antidote to availability bias. So next time you're thinking about making a decision, stop yourself and ask. Stop your fast brain and tell your fast brain to calm down and ask, hey, are you making a decision based on just one instance of or one piece of evidence? Yeah. So I would have also chosen the last option here. So it's not that. So basically, this is from confirmation bias, right? So how do you avoid confirmation bias? Whenever you make a decision, you stop yourself and think, hey, am I trying to trying to do whatever I believe? Am I pushing myself to just do what I believe instead of actually checking the facts, instead of spending more time considering if there are more things to consider? Like in this case, Arti should have said, hey, no, is it? I believe that hard work equals good grades, I know, but am I just doing things based on my belief? Should I calm down? Should I let my slow brain take over and think about maybe there are other things also leading to this, leading to the low grades? Right? So, another nice way, and especially in science, the best way to do this is to also always try to falsify your theories. So, what that means is if you come up with a theory like, hey, whoa, I don't know, a random theory that rain is caused by, rain is caused by butterflies. It's a random theory that I came up with. I don't know. So when does rain come? When butterflies, fly around in a place, that's when rain comes. That's a random theory. Now you believe that. Now, how do you? Obviously, it's a wrong theory. No, and we know that rain doesn't come from butterflies. But how would you check? Like, how do you make sure that this theory is wrong? Is by checking, hey, okay, by this logic, wherever there are butterflies, there should be rain, right? But look for places where there are butterflies and no rain. That means that your theory is wrong, right? So another way to kind of counter confirmation bias is to always falsify your beliefs and falsify and to cross check if what you're doing is right. Right? Yeah. So here we can see that a good majority chose the last option. By the way, it's not necessary that the last option is correct. Okay. But yeah, I would also chosen the last option. Yeah, we should not fall prey to the, I think, what this is, anchoring bias. Yeah. So we should not let our brain uh, let our brain fall prey to anchoring bias. So every time, so how would we stop ourselves? So we should think next time, like, are we getting anchored to something? Are we getting anchored to the discount, and therefore just making a decision? So you should take always let our um, slow brain take over. Right. Another way to tackle all this is to always constantly check yourself. Hey, am I doing Vaisati? Am I just thinking what I see is all there is? Maybe there is something outside of this also. Constantly stopping yourself and telling, hey, am I doing Vaisati? Am I doing Vaisati? Because your fast brain always does Vaisati. Right? When you're making decisions is another like a common theme. It's like it's something that encompasses all of these biases. Yeah, I would have chosen option C as well. Interesting. So I can see the majority chose that. So yeah, this is how you counter the thing. What this is not agree if I keep changing, getting the name. What's the framing effect? Framing. This is how you counter the framing effect. Um, you you don't like the moment you see something like 90% off or 90% this, 10% that. Um, Instead of directly thinking, oh my god, 90% must be amazing. Stop yourself, pause yourself. Uh, tell your once again tell your fast brain to calm down and check if you're doing Vaisati, and then check, okay, wait, is this actually the right thing or does it mean the same thing? Right? So that's the counter to all of this. So as you can see, the most best strategy to counter most of your biases is to pause and check if your fast brain is doing Vaisati. That's specifically the main question you ask yourself anytime you're making a quick decision like this. Right? Yeah. So now I'm gonna I'm gonna open out to some questions, and for that I'm going to share a form which I want you to I'm pretty sure all of you have questions, so I'm going to give this form. So I hear some interesting questions. I saw one particular question I saw was, hey, does peer pressure come under biases? Is it a bias? Do you think so? I would say yes. So many times, um, we do end up doing things simply because others do it. It's not exactly peer pressure. You can say it's like a culture bias. Many times we like, for example, it's very common for people to buy cars because everyone around them are buying cars, or people to buy certain things, especially buying decisions, right? Hey, you like buying a particular, I don't know, pen, or you want to buy a pencil because everyone around you is buying it. Um, it might be a good thing if that's what you want. If you want to feel included, that's a good thing. But it's not necessary that it's a good decision simply because others are doing it, right? So that's another common bias. It could be a part of availability bias also. It's like, hey, I'm seeing everyone else buy it, so therefore I should buy this, right? So yes, I would call it a bias. It's important to again pause and think, hey, do you really need this? Like if it's a pencil or a pen that all your friends are buying, do you actually need this? To pause and think about it before buying it simply because others are buying it. But you might do it, hey, just because you want to feel more included, you want to be a part of the gang. That's fine. As long as you're doing it for that reason, then it's fine. Yeah. So how to use biases for rapid fire questions? So that's a good question. I like it. Um, so see, it, or rather, thinking without biases is a slightly slow process. It's not a fast process. In fact, that's like the main takeaway, right? Your fast brain is very likely thinking with biases. So it's important to pause and think without biases. So these techniques are more for making slow, meditated decisions, not meditated. What word did I just use? I meant premeditated decisions, like basically decisions where you have time to make those decisions. It's not fast, like quick. Not for those. Of course, as you do more and more of that, your fast decisions also will get better. But these techniques are more, like I said, for those decisions that where you have the time and the luxury to take your time, think about it, and then make these decisions. Yeah. What if you're not given time to choose an option? Yeah, then it's like you're just like being lucky and just choosing whatever's coming to your head first. So that's more like memory kind of questions. That's not what I'm asking. So this is more for decision making. This is more like when you have to make a decision about something. That's when we need to use these techniques. So one question is this: so who is a rational person? So I would say a critical thinker. A rational is slightly different. Critical thinker is basically a thinker who thinks without these biases. Um, it's not necessary that that person needs to be very smart or very intelligent, but anyone who is aware of these biases and constantly prevents them from coming up when they're making decisions is what you call a critical thinker. How many types of biases are there? There are many types of biases. There are like, I mean, I don't know the total number of biases, but there are many like this. So I was talking about the most common one, especially the ones that come from Vaisati. But there are many. Why do we have biases? It's a good question. It's a I would say it's a byproduct of evolution. Our brain is kind of evolved like that, and our brain is evolved for certain good things also. There are certain reasons why it's like that, but unfortunately there are some side effects, which are bad. And it's important to be aware of those side effects and therefore kind of counter your bad thinking. Which part of our brain controls our actions? Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I know that there's some different parts of the brain. I don't know the exact biology of the brain, or the anatomy of the brain. I don't know the exact details. There's some hippocampus, hypothalamus, cerebellum. I know only the names, but I don't know the exact details of this. We should probably Google that. Why is it like this? I mean, like I said, it's like a part of evolution, I guess. I don't know. It's like asking, hey, why is there gravity? Like, I don't know. It's there. So you can't stop it from happening. Awesome. These were most of the, most common questions that I got. Awesome. Cool. That's it for today. I'm going to then prepare for the next masterclass, and I'm going to see you next Saturday. It was fun. Thank you so much for coming. As usual, I enjoyed it. I love taking the sessions. Thank you so much for. Have a good day.